So I'm here with Larry. We're in the Warbird section in the bomber line, and he's the owner of this beautiful, beautiful B-25. What can you tell us about it, Larry?
Well, the B-25 was the only combat-equipped airplane of World War II that saw duty from the beginning of the war to the end of the war, and in all theaters of the war by all the Allied air forces. This particular airplane was built in the fall of 1944. And it was built right at the end of the war, so it never left the United States, was used in a training mode and then stored. And then in 1952, it went through what was called a Hayes conversion, where they removed the armament and upgraded the avionics and then used it as a pilot trainer and liaison airplane until 1960, when it was sold surplus. Then became a fire bomber out of Arizona, modified, a big tank put in the belly of it and all. And then after that, it was sold to Bill and Bob Howe, who took it down to Florida and mounted spray bars under the wings, under the hard points, where you'd mount rockets or external bombs. And then they put a Volkswagen motor in the back running a pump, and then they sprayed orange groves and mosquitoes with it for about a decade. But with the DDT that they were spraying was so corrosive, literally the airplane was no longer airworthy due to corrosion. It was donated to the SST Museum in St. Cloud, Florida, parked out in the outside for a decade and a half, and just literally continued to rot away. Then it was, the museum went defunct. It was bought by Tom Riley at auction. Tom had restored 11 B-25s. This was the third one he restored. And he disassembled the airplane and began a 6-year restoration, working full-time, mostly 7 days a week with a full crew for 6 years to rebuild the airplane back to its original appearance.
So they've done a phenomenal job. I mean, this thing looks incredible, and we saw you at Sun and Fun in Florida as well.
Yeah, we were there. I've done Sun and Fun. Well, this is my 43rd year here at Oshkosh, and just about the same for Sun and Fun. We do both events each year. 25th year here with the B-25. Now, a lot of people ask me about the nose art, Panchito. What does that mean? Well, in October 1944, the Disney Corporation came out with an animated musical, a cartoon movie. It was all animated, called The Three Caballeros. And like many of the Disney feel-good movies of World War II, it was Donald Duck, Karaoke Joe, and Panchito were the three characters. Panchito, the Mexican rooster with the 2 6 guns bouncing around, shooting off. Karaoke Joe, the green parrot from Brazil, who was the suave, have you ever been to Bahia? And the ladies' man, and Donald Duck, the yakety 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 Donald Duck. So it was one of those feel-good movies of World War II. Well, Don Seiler, who was a young pilot with the 41st Bomb Group, they were flying the G models with a 75mm cannon mounted in the front, basically a Sherman tank gun mounted in the airplane. Most powerful gun ever put in an airplane in World War II. And he and his buddy Ben Tarnauskas, they had come back from their first combat tour down in Solomon Islands, and they'd been assigned these brand new J model B-25s and didn't know what they were going to do for paint scheme. Well, they went to the base theater, they saw the movie, they kept the playbill. Don painted Panchito on his, Ben Tarnauskas painted Karaoke Joe on his, another crew member painted Donald Duck on theirs, and the Three Caballeros then went off to Okinawa, Kadena Field, began operations against the Japanese in southern Kyushu and then against the Chinese. Now, interesting story. How old are you, Matthew? I want to use you as an example. Don Seiler volunteered, was trained as a pilot, did a combat tour, had enough points to rotate home after the tour in the Central Pacific down in the Solomon Islands, South Pacific. But he volunteered for a second tour, got the new airplane, and when he arrived in Okinawa, he was the senior combat pilot in the 396 Bomb Squadron, the old man. He was a captain in the U.S. Army Air Forces. And he was the pilot that the new replacement pilots had to fly one mission with before they get signed off to fly their own. And he was the same age. Matthew, come over here. How old are you?
22 years old.
And 22 years old, imagine. You're the old man. Don Seiler was 22 years old, the picture you were looking at before. 22 years old, the senior guy in the outfit, the guy whose everybody's life on that mission depended upon. Same age as you.
That's incredible.
You're the man. Okay, that's what World War II. That's what World War II is about. The young man that you saw the picture of there, Bill Miller, 19 years old.
Wow.
19 years old, and he was going on his second combat tour. He and his identical twin brother Bob, were the two turret gunners on the original Panchito. But Just think about it. That's who won the war. The young men your age and younger. Audie Murphy, the most decorated Army soldier of World War II, already earned the Purple Heart, earned multiple Purple Hearts, the Medal of Honor, but could not buy a beer in the O Club.
Wow. I've got goosebumps.
Wasn't old enough to buy a beer in the O Club, but he was wearing the Medal of Honor and multiple Purple Hearts. The most decorated soldier of World War II was not old enough to buy a beer in the O Club. That's who won the war.
That's crazy.
I would have snuck him a beer. I would have snuck you. I have snuck you beers.
No comment.
Read Audie Murphy's story sometime if you're not familiar with that. It's just an incredible story. The man who single-handedly took on multiple German outfits and held off a large German emplacement while his guys evacuated, standing on a burned-out tank with a 50 caliber machine gun exposed, and held down a whole German outfit. It's just the most incredible story. And here he is, a teenager. He's a teenager.
So on a lighter note, how many people does it take to polish a B-25?
Well, Harry Fox, who's our director of operations, is the one that does this. He's a retired executive from an international electronics firm, and this is his way of relaxing. He'll get up and come over. I'll look at the security cameras sometimes because I get a little beep on my phone. And I'll look, 3 in the morning, who's at the camera? And it'll be Harry in there polishing. So it's 90% Harry Fox and some of our other volunteers, but hundreds of hours to polish it.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, it's a lot of work. We polished one of our tiny little Sling 2s, and Carlos, who does our paint work, swore that he'd never do it again. So I can't even imagine.
People ask me, what's the best polish? I said, etch, iodine, and paint.
I'm a bit slow. It took me a half a second to work that out.
Well, it's I would have painted the airplane had it not been for having such a great group of volunteers. But people say, well, they painted them in World War II. Well, initially, yes. But think about this. How much paint does it take to paint an airplane this big? In weight, about the equivalent of one more 500-pound bomb. About 50 gallons of paint. Okay, so do you paint it or do you carry an extra bomb? Or you carry an extra hour's worth of fuel? They quit painting them. Why do it? It slowed down production. It added weight to the airplane. It really no benefit. And you look back at the photos of that era. Look at the photos of the aircraft in 1944, 1945. Most didn't have paint. They were bare metal with just the markings that was necessary. Speed them up in production. Otherwise, you had another week in production to paint it. Added weight, less fuel, less bomb load, less machine gun bullets you could carry. So this is not abnormal. And in the field, a lot of the mechanics were very proud. They would take flour, cooking flour, and other similar substances and polish the airplanes in the field.
Wow, impressive. And then...
Yeah, just trying to impress their pilots. I got the best looking airplane on the line.
Very nice. And it's important to take pride in your aircraft, right?
Well, and they did. And I'll tell you an important story. I was with a group of 345th Bomb Group veterans one weekend. You know, these are the Air Apaches, the guys that took B-25s into combat in New Guinea during the early part of the war when they were suffering tremendous casualties, malaria, living in tents and swamps, day after day, going out, heavy losses, up to 20% losses on some of their missions, going out and doing it again. But this guy was one of the mechanics that had to repair the airplanes, get them airworthy to go the next day, and he said something to me, looked me square in the eye, and he said, without us, them pilots, they just another mouth to feed. Think about it. If it wasn't the maintainers and the armorers, etc., that made the airplanes ready, the air crew, they were just somebody else to feed. The maintainers kept them in the air.
Our hardest working team at Sling, we're flying about over 4,000 hours a month. So we're doing a lot of maintenance, and there.
I'll put my hand in.
Fantastic. We could always do with another AMPIA.
Well, this thing really is what pretty much occupies my time. We have 3 Tiger Moths and 2 Chipmunks and several other airplanes as well that keeps me. It's been keeping me out of the cockpit, which is bad. But we got such phenomenal people that's flying the airplanes. I've been flying over 60 years. I really don't need any extra time in my logbook. and we've got such phenomenal people that's part of our organization. They're the ones that's going to be keeping flying them. You know, hell, I'm decades older than Ciara, a lot older than Sabrina. You know, so and Paul. I'm the oldest one in our whole organization, so we got a lot of younger people there. We got to bring them up. That keeps them interested, and that's our next future for keeping these icons flying.
And if someone wanted to make a donation or help out in some way, where should they go to do that?
Well, we have a website, Delaware Aviation Museum, real easy, DelawareAviationMuseum.org. And we have information on that. And your teaching training, we also have an FAA-approved flight training program for teaching pilots how to fly the B-25.
So I'm super excited now. We've got Sabrina and Ciara. Sabrina's head of training, and Ciara is...
Well, the newest SIC on the B-25 Panchito.
And
Trained by Sabrina last April.
so I was just saying before you got here, Sabrina, we're very supportive at Sling of women in aviation. We support a lot of women in aviation events, 99s events. So I was super excited to find out about you guys and to talk a little bit to Ciara. What can you tell me about flying Panchito?
Flying Panchito, that's probably a dream come true. It's a very different aircraft, built in the late 30s, so it's a different technology. It can be a handful. You have to be on top of it at all times and actually thinking way ahead of the aircraft. But that's typical of the aircraft at that time. So.
And what are your highlights with flying Panchito, Ciara?
Oh gosh, it's I'm on a vertical learning curve at the moment, so every time I get in it, it's a highlight. But it's being taught by Sabrina and the excellent training team at Delaware. It's building on my experience, which is in corporate aviation, and I've had quite a jump to make actually to get my head back into 30s mode instead of 2020 mode, and flying it's been quite wonderful. A low light I could mention is taxiing this thing.
Yeah, that is the hardest part of this aircraft is taxiing it and keeping it on the taxiway and getting it to the runway.
So not great visibility from the cockpit?
It's not really the visibility, it's how it's constructed. It's a free castering nose gear, so you have to think way ahead. The brakes are very sensitive and they can overheat. So you don't want to use the brakes while you're taxiing, except to stop you from going off the pavement. As far as turning it, you have to be way ahead. You have to fly full rudder because the rudder is right behind the slipstream of the propeller, and then you need a little dance with the hands of doing the differential power. So.
And I heard Ciara lives in France and just outside Paris and flies for Bombardier. Was that it?
I fly a Bombardier Global Express, as it used to be called. It's an ultra long range corporate jet, so fly around the world with that. So it has two engines, which is about the only similarity with Panchito behind, and that's my day job. It's quite a different experience.
And any advice for girls or women wanting to get into aviation?
Well, you need just to stick with it. Be tenacious. If you want to do it. You will meet hurdles, and none of them are unsurmountable, even though they might feel like it at the time. You will feel overwhelmed. That's completely normal for men too. Just keep going. Just stick at it. And if anyone offers help, take it. If anyone offers a ride in the plane, take it. No flying is ever wasted. Just absorb all the information you can and know that you can do it, even when it feels like you're about to climb a vertical cliff face or it feels impossible. It isn't. It's well within your capability.
And have you had any large obstacles that you had to deal with as a woman in aviation?
Well, being a woman in aviation, I started flying when I was 15, and I've done a lot of aerobatic flying, seaplane flying, and I've worked in a military side of things, doing electronic warfare training on Falcon aircraft, and I've done regional airline flying, and of course corporate flying as well. And so I've experienced a lot of different characters along the way, and what that brings with it. Yeah, well, there have been times when you do feel like somebody's looking at you, feeling you should be somewhere else, and that captain seat is mine. And so just you will meet them, but those dinosaurs are there.
So girls, don't take any crap from the guys.
Don't. Yeah. Would you agree with that,
Oh,
Sabrina?
I agree, 100%. Yes.
Sabrina's had a phenomenal career as well.
Yeah, I've retired airline, 37 years in airlines, between the regionals and the major. So I retired out of a 737. But I was flying the 737 during the week and coming to fly Panchito on the weekend. So it was a huge mental shift between the two aircraft.
And which,
You were flying some cool aircraft too.
What's that?
Prior to your 737.
What the old DC-6 is, that's where I started my large radial experience, DC-6 and the Convair 340. So that was my exposure young in life, and it just got in the blood. And when you get an opportunity like this, you never walk away from it. So.
and you prefer prefer flying the modern aircraft or the radials?
Well, I prefer the radials. Yeah, a lot more challenging. So, yeah.
And she styles it out.
Well, thanks so much for your time today, and I feel like you guys are doing really important work. We feel like we're doing important work too, just getting more and more women in the industry.
Please do.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
We've been a minority far too long, so we need more women up.
Okay, so let's fix it and have a fantastic Oshkosh.
All the signatures you see on here are World War II combat crew, B-25 crew, that we met over the last 25 years as we travel around the whole eastern half of the United States. But one interesting one, everyone came with a story, such as here, Lawrence Tomas, big tall Texan. He was a gunner, a waist gunner in the 345th Bomb Group, the famous Air Apaches. And the Japanese had reinforced his airfield. They came in one day to do a strafing run on it, thinking there was really nothing left on the airfield. The Japanese had reinforced it. They started coming up like a swarm of bees. And big tall Texan, he said, and after I shot down 5 of them, they quit coming at me. So that's why he called himself the Ace Gunner. He shot down 5 Japanese fighters on one mission as a waist gunner.